Good evening. My name is Michael Thompson. Today's session is going to be about PPE, personalized protective equipment in the workplace. It's going to be a very brief, general synopsis of the most commonly used forms of PPE. We'll also be talking about specialized PPE in the workplace. In this case, we will be talking about freezer work and working at heights, just briefly, just to give examples, a little bit of context. And I will also be briefly touching on engineering controls, which are used in production to minimize risk to workers. Before we get started, please bear with me. I have had a few technical issues today. The platform on which I was going to be delivering this session, I'd like to say it failed to work, but I may not have been able to work it myself. So we're going to be running the slides through an 8-year-old MacBook. So please bear with me. If I see anything that is a little bit fuzzy or out of focus, I'll bring it closer to the camera. Hopefully everybody will be able to have a good look. Now, I said PPE. Well, there's a prime example. Personalized protective equipment. Sorry about that. PPE, or personalized protective equipment, describes clothing or equipment worn to minimize the risk to a person's health and safety in the workplace, and should be worn at all times as deemed fit and necessary. If you're unsure about the correct PPE that you should be wearing to complete your duties, you should check with company policy. All right. Don't wing it, please. There's so many reasons for using the correct PPE. If you're not sure, check. There's no silly questions when it comes to health and safety. PPE covers everything from head to toe. So today we're going to briefly cover everything from head to toe. Starting at head, working through ears, eyes, face, hands, feet, arms, all the way down to your toes. And we will start with head. This is a very common sign you'll see in the workplace. Danger hard hats must be worn in this area. It's most commonly seen in construction. There are a few other specialized cases where you will see it, but like I said, mainly in construction. Everybody knows the Bob the Builder hat. Perfect example right here. This fine young gentleman's got his high-vis vest on. He's wearing his safety glasses, and he also has a hard hat on. Sometimes it might look a bit silly, uncomfortable, but they do serve a purpose. Mostly the purpose of this is not to absorb an impact, but to deflect it. They're very light, very, very hard, and they work. They've been used for a very long time because they work. There are also different engineering controls that can be used to protect the head. The one I'm showing today is the forklift roof. It's a little bit of an overseen hero, I think. I've had a few incidences in the past few years where the cage has saved my head, my rather large head on the screen, but anyway. It does do what it says on the packet. Now this gentleman's carrying a double stacked pallet of boxes. Never really a good idea, especially considering the height of the pallet. And it appears to be beer, which is a terrible tragedy because it's spilled over the top of the roof. But he's walking away from this accident. Probably not very happy, but he's walking away anyway. And that's the aim of the game. This is another prime example. A pack of timber has collapsed on the top of this forklift. That would end a person. It definitely would. But again, this occupant has managed to walk away to work another day, thanks to the engineering control. Now, next step down is ears. A lot of people don't give a lot of heed to ear protection, but it is integral. It really is. I know a lot of people that have been working for a long time before OH&S was actually as popular as it was today, and half of them are nearly deaf. And had they have known about it and worn it, they'd still be, well, hearing things better, I suppose. Now, ear defenders or ear muffs should be used when operating loud machinery. This does not necessarily have to be hand tools, but a prime example is hand tools, hand tools. Compressed air is another one. For example, on the sign here, It says hearing protection must be worn when operating the following tools: jigsaws, grinders, power drills, compressed air tools, and air hoses. It's there for a reason. These are common types of ear protection. I'll move this forward a little bit, I'm sorry. I don't know if that's able to be seen. But yep, they all perform a very similar task, maybe in a slightly different manner. Everybody knows the ear muffs, the idea of which is to protect your ears from sound being bombarded, keeps them nice and safe. But in this side, you can also see earplugs and ear defenders, which actually go inside the ear, not actually down the ear canal, but block the ear canal itself, which instead of actually deflecting all the sound, just stops it from traveling down the ear canal. They're quite commonly used in construction as well. I see a lot of guys using them. Our next topic is the eye, or the eyes. I suppose it's worthwhile protecting both of them. Now, there are specific tasks that may require specific PPE in regards to your eyes, such as safety glasses when performing a task that has a potential for risk to eye injury, such as operating a saw or a grinder, or even removing strapping from pallets, from packs of timber, anything that has the potential to move towards your eyes at a high rate of knots and cause damage. Right. This is a prime example of why we should be wearing eye protection in the right cases. This incredibly lucky young gentleman, he's got a mustache, has obviously been grinding at something, and the disc has shattered, which is surprisingly common, and it's catapulted itself towards his eye, and yeah, protection has saved him. It's definitely saved his eyesight, if not, potentially even saved his life. I've had a very similar experience with a nail gun. The nail hit, I'm assuming another nail or not, I'm not too sure. Shot back out, hit me right in the bridge of my safety glasses. Had I not been wearing them, I wouldn't be giving this session. Excuse me. Now, eye and face protection must be used when there is a risk of hazard causing injury or illness to the eyes or face, such as I said, flying objects, sparks, shards, corrosive material, direct sunlight, falling dust. Each of these hazards has its own control, a different type of PPE for each hazard. As it were, now on the slide you can see there's a pair of tinted safety glasses. These are very, very useful. Again, only for the right situation. You wouldn't wear these cutting timber in the dark, you know. But these I use these often when I'm driving forklifts. I'll go in and out of light and dark areas. It always takes a moment or two for your eyesight to adjust, especially when you're going out into direct light. These are very, very handy when you're traveling along with a couple of tons of forklift plus load. You need to see what's going on. You can't have a few seconds to adjust. So I'm sure these ones have saved a few lives. The next ones are goggles, safety goggles. Again, depending on the nature of the job in which you're doing, these safety goggles, they're designed basically to protect the eye from objects heading towards it. But they can also be used in dusty areas. They're very, very handy in dusty areas because they fit nice and snug to the face, the contours of the face. It forms almost like a gasket. The idea is to stop foreign materials and or objects, dust, whatever the case may be, from actually entering the eye. So, yep, they're quite good. This one is a face mask. Now, like I said, the most common forms that people associate with eye protection are just safety glasses, goggles, and stuff like that. But depending on the environment, as I said, goggles can be used. They're also very handy for, like I said, dust. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Face shields, there we go, are also common, again, depending on the nature of the hazard. Now, they should all fit comfortably, snugly. If they don't fit, then they're not doing their job properly. There's not much point in having goggles that are loose. Dust is going to get in. There's not much point in wearing them. And again, the same with face visors or face masks. They have to fit. They can't slip or slide. If you're working with chemicals, you can't exactly adjust it. It has to fit, has to work. If it doesn't, get a new one. It's that simple. It's a lot easier to stop work, get something that fits, does the job, as opposed to injuring yourself. Not even go there. Here's a nice little nifty combination, which is a hard hat / visor. Again, depending on the nature of work. Now, the next topic we're going to talk about is, I'm skipping down, is hand and body. Okay, we'll leave that as it is. Now, PPE should be administered based on an evaluation of the hazards and risks associated with the task being performed. It should also take into consideration the conditions of the environment and the duration of the task on which you're doing. Now, in regards to feet, it's surprisingly important as well. I've had a few foot injuries myself. Unfortunately, both on the same foot, but you know. Now, the correct foot protection is very, very important. So everybody associates foot safety with steel toe cap boots. A lot of people can also wear shoes nowadays. It seems to be the going thing. Now, they must be worn when entering an environment with a risk of, and again, PPE goes hand in hand with associated risk. The risks for safety footwear could be falling, slipping, electrocution, crushing injuries from pallets of stock, timber, could be anything basically. Rolling, piercing objects, that's a good one for construction sites. So slipping is a very good one. A lot of the good safety boots have slip resistant soles on them, the oil resistant as well. Excuse me. Electrocution, a lot of boots are now rubber insulated. Again, it's not going to make you invincible, but if there is a risk of electrocution, hopefully it isolates you and doesn't make you part of the circuit, which is not what you want. Crushing injuries and rolling, that can be used for, say, manufacture. Forklifts is another prime example. Something rolling over your foot that weighs about 3 or 4 tons, you're not going to have a good day. If you have a steel toe cap, or now I think they do specialized sort of composite plastic or something, depending on the environment in which you're working, that can save your toes. Some people say that it's not worth wiring. A lot of people say that the cap will lean in and cut your toes off, but I think it's a lot easier to reattach a severed toe than it is to reconstruct a crushed one. Right, as I said, there's an example of a boot, safety boot, which is my chosen footwear of choice. This is the more modern version. It's what the kids are wearing nowadays. Safety runner, safety shoe. I personally don't go for it because I like more ankle protection. That's because I'm more prone to falling over, I assume. Arms. Now, long sleeve tops are required when employees operate in areas where they may be exposed to hazards, such as thermal burns, sunburn, radiation, or chemical burns. It's self-explanatory. If the skin's exposed, it becomes in direct contact with the hazard, then there's nothing you can do. Again, I've worked with chemicals. I've done a lot of strange jobs. But I've worked with chemicals. If it gets on your top, take your top off. Simple. If it gets on your skin, you can't take your skin off. It's that simple. Working at heights is one of the special examples I was going to give before. When workers are working at heights, for example, working on a roof, tilers, roof plumbers, people fitting satellite dishes, or even people working on cherry pickers, order pickers, mobile platforms. Basically, anywhere there's a risk of hazard, one should be wearing a harness. The purpose of the harness, as this dashing young gentleman is demonstrating here, the purpose of a harness is not to stop you from falling. If you're going to fall, you're going to fall, but the purpose of a harness is to arrest the fall. A lot of harnesses have at the back a snatch strap, which is basically the cable, the rope, whatever you want to call it, gets compressed, gets folded up and down and up and down and up and down, and gets compressed into like a little sleeve almost, which hangs from the back of the harness. If the person is to fall off whichever platform they happen to be working on, it arrests the fall. It basically, the tension or the kinetic energy, whatever you want to call it, the momentum is arrested as the harness unravels under pressure. It takes a fair bit of a jolt to do it, and the harness, the straps could be a meter or two long depending on the height and which one's working. And it's to break the fall, it's to slow the fall, because if the fall's arrested suddenly, it can actually lead to serious injury as well, and that is not what we want. Yes, now, the second example that I'm going to give is temperature. Working at negative temperatures, I think that might go hand in hand with being from Ireland. I'm not too sure, but I've done a fair few years working in freezers. Now, the hand and body and occasionally foot protection should be provided to employees who are exposed to harmful temperature extremes. Now, this can range from everything from sun hats, sunscreen, gloves for hot surfaces, gloves for cold surfaces, woolly beanies, woolly gloves, freezer suits. Now, I've brought in two examples. The first one, these are my work gloves. Sorry, they shouldn't have been there. There's standard work gloves. The first example is the woolly beanie. Overlooked. A lot of people wear these in freezers and chillers. Retains the heat in your head, basically. Thermal retention is key. A lot of people choose not to wear steel toe cap boots nowadays in freezers because it freezes their toes. A lot of people use the other one. Now this is another example of PPE. It's a high-vis reflective freezer suit with one leg stuck. There we go. Freezer suit. This is rated to minus 24 degrees. Vital when you're working for sustained periods in sub-zero temperatures. Okay. So that was zero temperatures. Now, I like to say, slightly off topic, if you do find yourself working in a freezer environment or anywhere it's uncomfortably cold, take rest breaks. There's not much point in hurting yourself. Take a rest break. If you're cold, take a break. Right. PPE should be used hand in hand or in partnership with engineering controls to help minimize the risks to your safety. As I previously mentioned before, here's a few examples. We have an isolation cage or fence, depending on how you say, which is obviously going around a robot arm, plant equipment. This is moving parts. It's an autonomous piece of plant machinery. Sorry. It's unable to tell if people are there. Eliminate the risk. Remove the possibility of anybody coming into contact with that piece of machinery. It's simple, it's effective, and it works. And should be employed in all workplaces with relevant machinery, of course. Here's another prime example. That's another safety cage around another piece of machinery. They don't all have to look the same, but they do have to do the same job. And here's the third one. Again, this is it appears to be a belt-driven machine. So isolate the risk, cover the belt. Doesn't matter how stupid people or how many stupid people there are, nobody can put their hand in the moving part. Simple. Remove the risk. Now, PPE should be required at all times. Now, any and all employers who either work in the designated area or who enter the area must wear the appropriate PPE. No exceptions. I'm sorry, that's what that previous slide was. All employees who wear the PPE are responsible for reporting any malfunctions or problems with the equipment immediately to your supervisor, manager, health and safety rep, or generally I find your head of maintenance appears to be in control of PPE purchasing and so on and so forth. Now this can include just wear and tear. This can include worn out safety glasses, which would look a lot better on a slide, I'm sorry. You can see that. If you can't see through them, they're not worth it. Don't risk it. It can be holes in work boots. I've seen guys walking around before in companies I've worked with duct tape holding the boots together. This is not acceptable under any circumstance. I don't care how tight the boss is. You can't do that. It's not working. It's obviously not working. It needs to be changed out. You can put tape around it, it'll fall apart. You lose grip. It's counterproductive to the extreme. It could be scratch lenses on safety glasses, as I said, or it could be torn rain jackets. I think I have another example here. It's another high-vis jacket. Looks okay to the outside. Where is it? Sorry, excuse me. Gets a tear in it. Completely useless. There's not much point in having that. That's shopping. That can be a hazard for catching on anything you're walking past. Could be a piece of machinery. You could be dismounting from a mobile plant, i.e. a forklift. It can catch on a lever, spin you around, break a bone. It's just not worth it. Not to save a few dollars. It's definitely not worth it. Now, your manager or supervisor should ensure that you're wearing your appropriate PPE to suit the duties that you're performing. But it is ultimately your responsibility to ensure that you're wearing the right PPE, because in the end, it is yourself that's at risk. It's not your boss. It's not the guy who's in charge of the budget or the guy who wants to keep his shelves full of good PPE. I don't understand it, but it's your responsibility. Your neck is on the line. Now, if you are not supplied with the correct PPE for the required task, and then it's not safe to proceed, and your employer is in breach of his duty of care, it's of vital importance. PPE is not to be trifled with at all. Here's a couple examples. This is a safety harness. Again, I'm going to have to do the manual zoom. I'm sorry. Zoom. There's a safety harness is worn. All right. It might look just as good as the guy wearing the next safety harness, which is brand new, but in the end, common sense dictates if this guy's going to have a fall, his equipment's compromised, is putting him at risk, undue risk. So think safety first. Wear personal protective equipment when suited. Yeah, my name is Michael Thompson. That's been my brief presentation on PPE in the workplace. At this point, I would usually ask if there's any questions, but as I'm standing in a dining room on my own with a dog, I believe there's not. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. How do I stop this?